You know that feeling that something's wrong, but you can't quite tell what it is? That nagging tension we usually brush off? You tell yourself it's just paranoia. Sleep deprivation, too much bad coffee from the office machine. But today, you'll understand. Some things don't just happen randomly, they're warnings, signals, the kind of thing you only learn to recognize once it's already too late. My name is Lina and I work the night shift at an old hotel in a small town in the middle of nowhere, USA. One of those hotels that feels like it's stuck in time with worn-out carpet, faded chandeliers, and a smell of lavender mixed with mold. It wasn't exactly haunted, but it had never felt quite normal either. Things started off slowly, as they always do, right? With those tiny details you only notice after something bigger's already happened. I was in my second month on the job, covering the midnight 2-6 shift. I was the only staff member awake during those hours. No security, no housekeeping, just me, the dim hallways, and the fake smiles of the old portraits on the walls. That particular night, everything seemed fine. We only had a few guests, 5, maybe 6 rooms occupied. That usually meant a quiet shift. I passed the time reading reports, double-checking reservations, and glancing at the security monitors, mostly out of boredom, but around 2:17 a.m. And yes, I remember the exact time. The first weird thing happened. The front desk bell rang. But when I looked toward the empty lobby, there was no one there. Less than 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps, clear, steady ones, coming from the East Wing corridor, the oldest part of the hotel. I grabbed my flashlight, took a deep breath, and went to check it out. That's when I passed by room 3B. Funny how some doors feel older than the rest of the building. The paint was chipped more than the others, and the doorknob gave off this sharp, metallic creak. I'd never really noticed that before. Maybe it was just my imagination. But at that moment, with the footsteps fading away and the silence pressing down on everything, I couldn't help but look at the mirror right across from 3B. It was a big mirror, dark wooden frame, carved edges, fixed to the wall like it had always been there. My coworkers had told me it had been there forever, and in it, I saw something. It wasn't my reflection, and it wasn't anything I could see in the hallway either. It was something that passed behind me. Only I hadn't heard anything. I hadn't felt anything. And when I turned around, of course, no one was there. But the mirror, it was still rippling, as if something had actually moved behind me. Fast, leaving behind a trace of motion. I went back to the front desk in a daze. I'm not someone who scares easily, but that rattled me. I stared at the security monitors, hoping to find some kind of explanation. But of course, the East Wing hallway wasn't covered by any of the cameras. I thought about writing it down in the incident log, but it felt ridiculous. I ended up scribbling, "Strange reflection in East hallway mirror." Sounds dumb, right? Like something out of a bad movie, but I knew what I saw. Or better, what I couldn't unsee. The next morning, when housekeeping arrived for her shift, I casually brought it up just to see if she'd ever felt anything weird back there. And that's when she said, without even hesitating, "Oh, the mirror by 3B. Some people don't like walking past it at night. They say it brings bad luck." She laughed after that, like it was just a joke. After that night, I couldn't stop noticing that mirror. It became automatic. Every time I walked down the East Wing, my eyes would dart to it on their own. Days went by with nothing strange. Work settled into its usual rhythm. Most hotel incidents were the typical stuff: drunk guests locked out of their rooms, or issues with the heating upstairs. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. And I was right. The following Friday, almost at the same time, something else happened. I was at the front desk when the east hallway lights started flickering. Not unusual for an old building, I told myself, but that night they flickered in a weird rhythm, almost like a pattern, like a code, like someone wanted attention. I grabbed the flashlight and headed down the hallway, not because I was brave, because protocol said I had to. As I turned the corner, I saw the mirror again. But this time, someone was standing in front of it. I froze. It was a woman, facing away, tall, with long dark hair, wearing an old-fashioned dress, 1940s maybe, or 50s. She stood completely still, staring at her own reflection. Or so I thought, because when I took 2 more steps, she vanished. She didn't turn, didn't run, didn't make a sound. She just wasn't there anymore. The mirror went back to showing only the hallway and my terrified face. The next morning, I asked another longtime staff member, Tony, the weekend night guard, "Hey, have you ever seen anything weird in the east hallway?" He frowned and answered way too fast. "You too." That was all, he said. He didn't want to talk about it. He just gave me this hard look and told me it was better not to give attention to whatever shows up over there. After that, the dreams started, always with the mirror, always with the woman in the vintage dress. But in the dreams, she was looking at me, not just at her reflection. She was aware. She could see me. She knew I was there, and she whispered something I couldn't hear. At work, I started avoiding that hallway. I took longer routes to deliver items to rooms or respond to guest requests. But the lights kept flickering until one day something actually happened. Something physical, so real it erased any doubt that this was more than just my imagination. I was walking through the West Wing corridor, heading to the laundry room. I passed one of the storage doors and heard something fall behind me. Loud, fast, like glass shattering. I ran back, and there it was. The mirror from 3B on the floor, but the strangest part, it was intact, not a single crack. It was lying face up, staring at the ceiling, resting on nothing, as if someone had gently taken it down and placed it there. But there was no way that could have happened without a sound. And that floor was completely empty that night. Absolutely no one. I called the morning shift manager and explained what had happened. He looked at me. The mirror told maintenance to hang it back on the wall. And, of course, gave me that look like I'd been sleeping on the job. But I knew it wasn't an accident. It wasn't vandalism. It was a warning, and that's when I started feeling ... Watched. The sensation was constant, and the fear began to follow me outside of work, at home, in the car windows, even on the dark screen of my phone. The mirror hadn't stayed at the hotel. After that night, the night the mirror was found on the ground, whole and unexplained, something inside me changed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was paranoia, a deep discomfort that felt like it was quietly eating away at my mind. The worst part, no one else seemed to notice. None of my coworkers mentioned shadows. No one talked about the flickering lights. Not a single word about the woman in the vintage dress. And I started to wonder, was it just me? One night, during my break, I went to the back room where staff usually grab a snack or rest a bit. There's a small microwave, an old fridge, and a TV that only works when it wants to. And there, across from the fridge, hangs another mirror, smaller. But it reflected the little table and chair where I usually sat with my coffee. That night, when I closed the door and sat down, something felt wrong. The mirror ... showed the room. Everything was there. But my reflection was not. For a second maybe, Tua didn't see myself. Just the empty chair? I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. I looked again, and there I was, back in the mirror, trembling, pale, eyes wide, with fear. I tried to think of a logical explanation. A delay in the reflection. A trick of the light, fatigue. But that feeling haunted me for the rest of the night. The sensation of being absent from your own reflection isn't something you forget easily. It's like a part of you has slipped away, vanished. Things only got worse after that. A few nights later, a guest came down to the front desk crying. She said she saw someone inside the mirror in her room, that the person smiled at her. but it wasn't her reflection. It was someone behind her. It was the first time anyone besides me mentioned something strange. I felt torn between relief and dread, because in a way, it confirmed that the problem wasn't just in my head. The next night, I decided to run a test. I took my phone with me, went to the east corridor, set the camera facing the mirror like I was going to take a selfie, and hit record. Dudden, look. I just turned around and let the camera roll for a few minutes. When I watched the footage, the first seconds were normal. An empty hallway. My silhouette, the reflection, but at 37 seconds, the background of the mirror darkens slightly. A shadow begins to form behind me. Slow, warped, like it was sliding along the inside of the mirror. The figure was approaching me in the reflection, but in the real image, there was nothing. I was completely alone. And then it moved. The woman in the old dress, long hair, deep, dark, empty eyes. In the video, she positioned herself right behind me, so close she could have touched my shoulder. And she did something that still makes me break into a cold sweat. She leaned in and whispered something in my ear. No sound was heard in the video, but I saw myself flinch. In real time, I hadn't heard anything. But watching it back, it was like my body had responded to something my mind hadn't processed. After that, I stopped recording. Deleted the video. Locked my phone in the staff locker and went to cry in the bathroom. I didn't know what was real anymore. After that video, I changed. Not in ways people would notice right away, but something inside me broke. I began to feel like I was two separate beings. The one who walks, breathes, clocks in at the hotel, and the one in the mirror. They didn't always seem to act in sync. It was subtle, but I started to notice. One night, I went to the back bathroom, washed my hands, leaned forward, wanting to stare at myself. Maybe out of anger, maybe morbid curiosity, maybe just to convince myself it was still me in there. But the reflection smiled, and I didn't. It wasn't a normal smile. It was small, almost imperceptible, but I felt it as if whatever was mimicking me was satisfied with something. With what? I don't know. I backed away quickly, so fast I stumbled into the door. And that's when it happened. I left the bathroom, turned off the light, walked to the end of the hallway, took a left, tried to act normal, to breathe, to think. But when I glanced at the glass panel on the exit door, the one that reflects the hallway, my reflection was still there, standing inside the bathroom, staring straight at me. It froze me in place. I went back slowly, forced myself to open the bathroom door again. Empty, bright, no sound. But the feeling that I hadn't fully left that space stayed with me. From that night on, I began avoiding myself. I stopped looking directly at mirrors, store windows, glass reflections. I started covering the locker room mirror with masking tape, developed a habit of walking the halls with my head down, eyes away from anything that could reflect me back at myself. The security cameras started glitching too, especially at night, especially in areas with multiple mirrors. Footage would freeze, show interference, sometimes go black entirely. I showed it to the manager. He laughed, made a ghost joke, and replaced the cables. As always, others saw technical issues. I saw signs. One day, I had to clean an empty room on the 3rd floor. The previous guest had canceled last minute. They said he felt unwell, had some kind of nervous episode. I opened the door. The first thing I noticed was the broken mirror. There was no maintenance report, no record in the system, no call, nothing. And here's the odd part. The glass shards were scattered only inside the room, from the outside of the mirror. Smooth, intact, no crack. As if something had broken its way in. That's when I started thinking the mirrors in the hotel weren't just objects. They were portals. Not necessarily to something supernatural, but psychological. I began to feel like things got trapped inside them. That mirror stored fragments of whatever passed in front of them. Emotions, trauma, thoughts, and maybe sometimes they let those things out. When you work in an old hotel with hundreds of guests every month, imagine how many stories collect inside those walls. How many reflections cry, scream, lose their minds in front of a mirror? What if the mirror remembers them all? That night, I slept at home with the mirror in my bedroom covered by a sheet. I didn't want to see my face. I didn't want to confirm that what was staring back was still me. In the days that followed, everything began to unravel a bit more. Not all at once. There wasn't some dramatic event, no loud breakdown. It was like a wet cloth hanging on a line, slowly dripping until it touches the ground. My perception of reality blurred, as if someone had tampered with the lens through which I viewed the world. The boundaries between what was my reflection and what was just imagination. Everything became hazy, like those old mirrors with cracked edges and cloudy glass, dulled by chimney, where your image comes back a little late and a little wrong. You look at it and it takes half a second to recognize yourself. At the hotel, I started developing habit avoided. Mirrors instinctively averted my eyes even from the reflection in a drinking glass. I preferred rooms with only one mirror, and if I could, I'd cover it with a face towel. I told people the bigger rooms were just too much for one person to clean, and technically, that was true, but not in the way they thought. It wasn't about physical effort. It was about surveillance. Larger rooms meant more surfaces, more angles, more chances of seeing something or being seen. There was one room in particular, 417. It's at the far end of the east hallway, corner of the building, somewhat isolated. I never liked that room. Even before all this began, it's the kind of place where silence feels thicker, where the light comes in but doesn't really light anything up. It has 3 mirrors, one on the closet doors, one in the bathroom, and the worst one round, old-fashioned, hanging above the desk by a bronze chain that creaks when the AC unit vibrates too much. The last time I went in there, I closed the door carefully and took a deep breath. I wanted to prove to myself that there was nothing wrong, that it was just paranoia, overwork, sleepless nights. But deep down, I already knew. I knew I had crossed the line, and whatever I saw in that room wouldn't just be a reflection. This was a test, a confrontation ritual. I cleaned in silence, avoided unnecessary noise, like I was trespassing on someone else's territory, made the bed, swept the floor, replaced the towels. In the bathroom, I kept my eyes low as I wiped the sink. Everything methodical, automatic. But the round mirror, I ignored it completely, moved around it like it had a magnetic field. I knew that if I looked, really looked, something would happen, but it wasn't a matter of me looking. It looked at me. I can't explain it rationally. It was a physical sensation. Immediate, a sudden pressure on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me from just an inch away. You know, that distinct feeling of being stared at for too long. That urgency your body feels to turn around without knowing why. I felt that, and I turned. And there I was, in the mirror. But not how I really was. My reflection was completely still, staring back with wide eyes and held breath. But I wasn't like that. I was moving, breathing, blinking. The difference was jarring. Like the image in there was frozen in time, watching. And that's when I saw it. In the bottom right corner of the mirror, there was a shape, dark, blurry, out of focused, but definitely there. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, didn't breathe. But it was there. A stain of presence, a distortion that didn't belong to the room's architecture. My heart pounded. I turned fast, like I was about to catch someone red-handed. But of course there was nothing, just the carpet, the wall, the desk. I looked back at the mirror, slowly. The thing had moved closer. It was now nearer to my reflection than I was. It stood behind me, but only in the mirror. There was no weight on the floor, No shadow in the real room, just in the image. And the strangest part, my reflected version knew it. She was frozen in terror, eyes bulging, lips parted like she was about to scream, but silent. It was an expression I couldn't replicate. Like that face wasn't mine anymore. And then it happened. The image twitched, a kind of glitch, as if reality itself had hiccuped. Not me, not the thing, the mirror. It blinked. Just for a second, a subtle flicker, a light dimming and flaring back inside the glass. A glitch. But in that second, I swear on everything, the reflection of the thing touched me on the shoulder with an invisible hand, and I felt it. A weight. A cold, dense pressure. The kind of touch that makes your skin flinch before your brain even understands. A presence, invasive, real, and I knew, without any doubt, that it recognized me, that it knew me, that maybe it had been waiting. I dropped everything. The mop hit the floor with a wet thud. Ron, without looking back, left the cleaning cart in the hallway, towels tossed, keys still hanging on the doorknob. I walked right past the manager, who didn't even notice me, left the hotel like a ghost, terrified that if I glanced at any reflective surface, it would be there, following me. But the worst part wasn't what happened there. It's what started happening after, in the bus window. In the darkened reflection of the car's rearview mirror, on the black screen of my phone when it locks. The thing was in all of them. Not always, not clearly, but from time to time, a blur, a strange stain where it shouldn't be, an eye that wasn't mine. A delayed movement, a reflection that didn't match me. And worse, little by little, my reflection started acting on its own. Small lags, expressions that didn't match. A half smile in the elevator mirror when I was serious. A look of disgust from the cafe window while I just wanted to order a coffee. There's a name for this. You know, it's called strange face in the mirror illusion, a documented psychological phenomenon where, if you stare at your own reflection too long in low light, the brain starts to fail. It starts to invent shadows where there are none, movement where there's only stillness. But what if ... it's not just that? What if mirrors are more than just surfaces? What if they're doors, recordings, cameras, or prisons? These days, I cover every mirror in my house, even the one on the microwave. And I wear sunglasses, not to hide my face, but to forget it exists. Because the last time I saw my reflection, it looked back at me with hatred, with hunger, like it was patiently waiting for its turn. If you work nights, or live with long hallways, flickering lights, and the constant company of your own reflection, be careful. Not everything that looks back at you is on your side. And if one day you stare into the mirror and it blinks, run before whatever's on the other side finally crosses over. If you've ever experienced something weird, eerie, or just plain bizarre at work, send it our way. Here, your trauma becomes content. And hey, it's cheaper than therapy. Drop it in the comments. Who knows? Your story might be the next one we turn into a script. Don't forget to like and follow our channel for more stories like this one.